This is our session on protecting data integrity and having traceability in your testing. Part of the larger Instron biomedical testing open house event we're doing this week. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Nick Erickson, your host for this session. For this discussion, I'm joined by Elayne Gordonov, product manager for our static testing software, which includes our Bluehill Universal platform. Elayne has worked with Instron for more than 8 years, working in the role of an applications engineer and market manager for the biomedical industry before moving on to her current role of product management. For this session, Elayne will be guiding us through an in-depth look at some of the security and traceability features available in Bluehill Universal that can protect your data integrity and allow you to achieve traceable test results, something that is absolutely critical to the audit process. Elayne's presentation should take around 40 to 45 minutes, and then we should have time for questions at the end. So please use the chat box on your GoToWebinar panel to submit any relevant questions you have as we go along. This is probably going to sound like a broken record for some of you that have been to some of the other sessions, but this is a quick reminder about the free access to the Essentials of Biomedical Testing e-learning course. You just want to complete the post-event survey that'll display immediately following the session. And I'm going to remind you again at the end of the session. So with that said, I'm going to turn things over to Elayne.
Great, thanks, Nick. Just to reiterate, my name is Elayne Gordonov, and I'm the software product manager for Instron static software, which includes Bluehill as well as Trend Tracker. And today I'm very excited to talk to you about protecting data integrity and having traceability in your testing from my perspective, which is a software perspective. So during today's 1-hour session, we will focus on 3 main areas. The first is security. I'll talk about simple best practices, and I'll do a brief demo of a new feature in Bluehill called Screen Lock that I'm really excited about. After the demo, we'll jump back into PowerPoint and discuss some easy ways to optimize your test methods to prevent mistakes and protect data integrity. And finally, I'll introduce one of Bluehill's latest modules called the Traceability module, which was designed to help our users meet an FDA standard that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. That's FDA 21 CFR Part 11. And I'll wrap up with a demo of the Traceability module. So that'll be covered in today's session. So jumping into things, let's talk about security. So in my mind, this is where protecting data integrity starts. Security is pretty straightforward, and when enabled, it includes 3 types. There is Bluehill security, which is security internal to the Bluehill application and requires user profiles to be configured within the software. And next, there is Windows security, which is security based on the Windows user groups that are configured on the local PC. So this is most often used when a computer is not connected to a company's network, or at least that's what I've seen. And finally, there is Active Directory, which is security based on user groups on a company's corporate network. And now I think we can all agree that there's value in security and see why it's important. So I have a quick poll for you. And I visited numerous Instron customers over my 8 years working at Instron, and it always amazes me to see people sharing the same usernames and passwords. So Instron's default security uses the username Instron and the password Instron. So just a quick poll to put up, is this a good username and password combination? So I'll give you a couple of seconds. So great, I'm happy to see that 100% of people said no, it's not a great combination. And Bluehill security is great if used correctly, but most of the medical device and pharmaceutical companies that I've worked with, that I've spoken with, all seem to be implementing Active Directory because of the robustness of permissions. and users are less likely to do things like share password information, since the same username and passwords are used to actually log into your personal work PC. So I have another quick poll for you. So should passwords expire? And this is usually an inconvenience for all of us, but I want to ask, what do people think? Okay, so a little bit more mixed, mostly yeses, which makes me happy because I do agree, although it's an inconvenience, passwords really should expire and we should force users to enter new passwords after a certain time interval. So if you're using Bluehill security, you can set passwords to expire after a set time interval in the software. So admins can do this. And if using Windows or Active Directory security, passwords will automatically expire based on your corporate IT policy. So there's some convenience there with using Active Directory. So security is pretty simple, but it's critically important. So here are some of my basic tips for protecting data integrity. Create unique security profiles for each Instron user. If using Bluehill security, set password expiration criteria. Use Active Directory security to utilize network usernames and passwords from your corporate network. This ensures uniqueness, password expiration, and character and length requirements for passwords determined by your IT department. Give users the minimum permission to do their job. And finally, be sure to understand each permission, and don't worry, there really aren't that many. I think we've done a really great job in this software of simplifying the user interface to only highlight the really critical permissions needed. And you can see that in the screenshot to the right. So related to security is a new feature I wanted to talk about that we added in the last release of Bluehill. This is called screen lock. So users can lock the software when needed, like when walking away from the Instron system. And Bluehill can also automatically lock due to inactivity. So this would be set up by a lab manager or an admin. And I'd like to show that in a demo. Okay, so I have Bluehill open. I hope everyone can see that. So I'm going to log in to the software as myself and log in. So I'm set up as an admin, so I have full rights within the software. I'm going to go into the admin tab. Under preferences, there's this new option here for screen lock. It's fairly straightforward. Software locks when inactivity exceeds, and then there's a drop down where you can choose the time. So I'm just going to choose 1 minute for the purpose of this demo and navigate back to the home screen. So I'm going to not touch my mouse or keyboard and not touch the software at all. And when I'm inactive for the inactivity period, which is 1 minute in this case, the screen will lock. So this is really important if you're worried about users in your lab logging into the software under their unique user profile and then maybe walking away from the system, either walking away for a few minutes to grab a coffee or use the restroom, or maybe walking away for longer, going to attend a meeting, and someone else going up to the Instron system and running tests under that other person's user account. So screen lock is aimed to protect data integrity because you're making sure that only the correct user can be logged into the software. So 1 minute elapsed, and you can see now the software is just locked. So we get this nice message to a reminder to keep clear of the test area. You can see that my username and contact information was pulled from my security profile. as well as the message that the software was locked due to inactivity. So if I want to unlock, I can easily do that, but now I have to revalidate my credentials by typing in my password. And now the software is unlocked. You'll also see that there's this little lock icon throughout the software. So this is giving users the ability to lock on demand. So I gave the example of a 1-minute timeout. That's if someone walks away from the system and forgets to log out of the software. But you'll see that screen lock, this lock icon, it appears in every window. So if I knew I was going to walk away, I could very easily just lock the software and walk away to go grab my coffee or go to my meeting. You can also edit the message here if you want to say something, you know, with more meaning, like I'll be back at 3 p.m. So I'll unlock. Great. So now I'll switch back over. Great. So that was the new screen lock option. So now I want to switch gears a bit and talk about Bluehill methods and some very easy steps that you can take to optimize your test methods to prevent operator errors and protect data integrity. So over my last 8 years working at Instron, I've heard this a lot from lab managers. We keep losing data. Operators say they ran a batch, but the results are not there. And when I hear this from lab managers, it's very unfortunate because this should really never happen. This is very easily preventable. It's just a matter of setting up certain safeguards within the software. So here are my tips. So set security permissions to prevent data overwrite. So normally when a lab manager will say there are results missing, it's usually because an operator or a tester was able to overwrite data. So make sure to set security permissions to prevent that. Set the default directory in your test method, so that's where files are actually saved. And append sample files with a date and timestamp. So let's go into more detail on each of these. So the first one about setting security permissions, there are really 3. So I just wrote here overwrite because that's what I see most commonly. But there are really 3 security permissions that we should focus on. Override sample location, discard the sample, and then overwrite the sample. So override sample location, this permission allows a user to browse to a different folder when using save as to save a sample file into a different folder. So a user not authorized for this task can save this sample under a different name using save as, but the user cannot browse to a different folder, which is really important. And we'll get into that when we go to tip number 2. So if users will be prevented from changing the sample location, it is important that the method specifies the default folder. So the next permission, discard the sample. This permission allows a user to close the test tab without saving a sample that was not previously saved or finished. So the user can either close the software or return to the home screen without saving the sample. And discarding a sample permanently deletes all changes made since the sample was last saved, and these changes cannot be recovered. So I'm not sure who should have this permission, but I would say no one should really be able to discard a sample file. And then finally, overwrite the sample, the last permission. So this permission allows a user to save the currently open sample with the save as option and enter a previously used sample name. This option overwrites the previously saved sample. So this is what I see most commonly at customer sites, that users or testers are able to actually overwrite a sample. So a user that does not have this permission must use the save option to save an existing sample with the original file name. So I'm sure, as you can appreciate, these security permissions are very important to protect your data. So tip 2 and tip 3 focus on configuring the methods, and configure methods to set the default directory and append all test data with a date and timestamp. So both these options are in the file settings section of the method. As mentioned, when the default folder is configured in the method, this, in combination with disabling the override sample file location permission, sets the directory and prevents users from saving to a different directory. So if you think you've lost data, there's not a need to browse around your PC to find the missing data. You basically lock down the software, the Bluehill application, and you lock down the directory where users can save data. So you'll have peace of mind that all your testing data is saved to a fixed location, whether that location is locally to the PC or on a network location. And by appending a date and timestamp to each sample file means that each time a sample file is saved, the sample file name will include the unique date and time stamp. So this, in combination with a user's permission to discard a sample file, means that every test must be saved, and you can easily find each unique sample file. So these are really simple things that you can do, but they're very powerful, easy steps that you can make today in your methods, but they will help protect your data. So another common question I hear often from Instron's lab managers who are trying to protect data integrity is, how can I be sure operators use the correct load cell and fixtures for my test? So my tips are: create a workflow with prompted test, set up name transducers, and the last, use auto positioning, which is a new feature on our brand new frames, our brand new 6800 frames. So let's start off going over prompted test, and I have a quick video. There is voiceover on this video, so I'm gonna play that now.
In some cases, users may want guidance for running a test, or lab managers may want to follow a specific procedure to prevent operator error. A prompted test can be configured by going into the Method tab and turning on Prompted Test. By enabling Prompted Test, a user can create a workflow that the system operator must follow until finishing testing. Here is a list of some of the options that can be configured as part of Prompted Test. Create a sequence. Here you would define parameters such as required number of specimens to be tested and the necessary steps in the workflow. Start sample. This is where the operator would enter information before starting a new sample, such as lot number or lab conditions. Before test is where users would enter information like specimen dimensions, specimen ID, and instructions for properly placing the specimen in the load string. Additionally, you can add a picture file to visually guide users on proper test setup, preventing issues such as specimen misalignment. Before analysis is used when calculations require information from the operator, such as using the cursor select to identify points on the graph or the failure mode of the specimen. Test notes is where the operator could add any additional notes about the test. The finish prompt automatically appears when the required number of specimens are tested. It will prompt the user to add any additional information about the sample or alter export settings such as folder location and file name. Now let's go through to view what the operator would see during a test. Prompted test is ideal for quality control professionals who are responsible for collecting accurate and reproducible data and results. Prompted test can offer peace of mind for a lab manager. as it can reduce human error and ensure all data is collected in a consistent manner.
Okay, so I thought that was a good introduction on prompted tests. So just to do a quick recap, from my perspective, what is so beneficial about using prompted tests is that you can customize the prompted test layout with notes. So if anything happened, if you want something to happen before a test occurs, you can write notes for the operator, as well as you can add an image to visually guide an operator if there's something that someone should be paying close attention to. So we require sample or batch information before a test. So if there's a batch number or a lot number that someone needs to put in before testing occurs, or maybe it's specimen measurement, that can all be added in a consistent layout before testing starts. And then finally, operators should not start a test until information is completed. So you just know that you're gathering all the information up front and helping to guide users through the process, because I can appreciate that for a lot of our testers or operators or super users, the Instron equipment is another piece of laboratory equipment in your lab. So it might be difficult for different testers to remember what to do on each piece of laboratory equipment. So prompted tests really helps maintain that consistency. So our next tip for protecting data integrity is tip number 2, set up name transducers. So name transducers ensure that an operator can only run a test when the correct load cell is used. So setting up a name transducer is easy. You'll need to identify what load cell should be used with which method. So someone with administrator permissions will need to plug in the desired load cell and then go to the admin tab in the software. And then in that admin tab under transducers, name the actual load cell. So in this example, I'm calling this load cell my 5 kilonewton load cell. And then link that name with the transducer serial ID. And then in the method, select the load cell as the required physical measurement. And it's really that simple. That means that in my method, say I have method A, a user can only run a test with method A if they're using the appropriate load cell. So it really helps prevent mistakes. So if you're interested, after this webinar, we'll share more information on how to configure name transducers. We're working on a detailed user guide, so stay tuned. And then finally, our last method-specific tip for protecting data integrity is tip number 3, which is set up auto position. So auto position is new functionality available on Instron's brand new line of materials testing systems, the 6800 systems. Auto position ensures consistent setup and guides operators through configuring their system for repeatable use by remembering the crosshead's position for each test. So I also have a video. You can see this operator, she's opening her method. She sees a picture of her load string, and she'll install the lower grip. And then to the right of her screen, there's information that the crosshead is going to move down 70 millimeters. And she could start running her tests. So I'll give you a little bit more information about auto positioning. Within the software, a user would set up a global load string. So this is again in the admin tab. Maybe this is something that a lab manager or an administrator would do. You'd set up your fixtures. So any fixture that's set up with auto positioning can be used across all methods, which is pretty neat. It does require a teach point. So you basically teach the system, and the teach point is used as a reference position for the fixture separation. And they can also upload a picture of the fixtures for reference. So then what a user would see, so users are prompted to install the fixtures, set their safety limits, and then press unlock and return. And that will return the crosshead to the starting position, just like we saw in the video. So this guarantees that the crosshead will start at the correct position for every test. So in summary, the 3 tips for ensuring operators use the correct load cell and fixtures for each test, use prompted tests to guide users with images and text, set up name transducers to make sure an operator cannot start a test unless the correct, verified, and calibrated load cell is being used, and finally, utilize auto position on Instron's brand new 6800 systems.
Hey, Elayne, I'm going to just pop in here. There is a relevant question that I'm hoping you can answer just real quick for this person. It's in reference to auto positioning, and they want to confirm if that's only for the 6800 system.
Yeah, great question. It is only for the 6800 systems. So I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience don't have 6800 systems yet. We just released those in February of this year. But it's a new feature that comes standard on all those new frames. So great question. So we just talked about some simple and effective ways to protect data integrity in the software. And now I'd like to discuss having traceability in your testing. So a lot of you on the call are probably familiar with this FDA standard, FDA 21 CFR Part 11. And this can be an intimidating standard at times, but what it boils down to is really pretty simple. So what I've seen, and from my understanding of working with customers, I'm talking to FDA auditors, is that it's really quite simple. People want to know who did what, when, and why in the software, and have the ability to prove it. And why this focuses on the software is because it's related to electronic records. And when you think about an Instron system and Bluehill Universal, Bluehill is generating the electronic records that it's essentially your data. So it's really important to be able to know who generated that data, what did they do, when, and why, and then having that secure and searchable audit trail to prove it. And again, the goal is to protect data integrity, to deliver superior products in safety critical applications. When you think about medical devices, pharmaceutical products, these are definitely safety critical applications. And finally, it's a partnership. So it's not just something that Instron can supply a software package that automatically allows a laboratory to meet Part 11 compliance. It's really about integrating the solution provided by a company like Instron into your entire quality management system. So it's definitely a partnership between the vendor and then your laboratory. So with that, I want to jump over and do a demo of the traceability module. Okay, my software locked. Log in, great. everyone can see my Bluehill screen now. So I'm actually going to log out, and I'm going to log in as a different user. I'm going to log in as a user named Sally. So Sally is a super user. Maybe she attended this webinar, so she wants to edit a method so that she can control where her files are saved, as well as append her sample files with a date and timestamp. So I just opened an existing method. You can see this method is now on revision 3. We also have this icon. This shows the method log, or this is where the revision history is stored. So I can open that up. And now I can see, because we have the traceability module, I can see all of the changes that occurred in this method. So I could see the very first revision. This method was created by a user named Adam. I can see all of the things that he added. Collapse that. I can see revision 2, which was made by a user named Maya. And I can see she changed some values, so the previous value to the new value. So this is allowing me to understand the who is editing the software, as well as what changes are these users making. And I could collapse. And you see there aren't any pending changes because I haven't made any changes in the software. So that's the revision history of the method, as well as you can see signatures. So the way I configured my system is I configured it with electronic signatures. Specifically for method files, methods are configured with 2 electronic signatures, meaning the primary signature is the person who's making the change. The secondary signature is someone who reviews it and approves. So this is all configurable, but this is how I configured my system. So now I'm going to go to exports, file settings, and this is what we talked about a couple of minutes ago. I can set my default folder. So anytime a test is conducted with this method, all data will be saved to a default location, and I can specify that. So I'm going to specify just the outputs folder. I can specify a file name. So I can say testing for webinar. And then I can append all sample files with a date and timestamp. So what this is going to do is that anytime I do any testing with method E, the results will be saved to this default folder, this location. The file name is determined based on what I type in here. And then all sample files will be appended by a date and timestamp. So say Sally is happy with that. You can see we're still on revision 3. I'm going to save. So now you can see I'm saving method E. I need to put in a comment. Updated per Instron webinar. And I'm going to type in her password to validate her as a user and submit for review. And now you can see that my method has been up-revved. Now I'm on revision 4. I put my primary signature as Sally, the person making the change. You can see Sally, we're on revision 4, the date and timestamp, as well as her comment. However, this method is now pending a secondary review because, as mentioned, I have my system configured where methods require a second sign-off before anyone could test with it. So I'm going to navigate back home. And I will log out of the software and I'll log in as Maya, who is the manager. So because Maya is the manager, based on her permissions, she has the ability to approve methods. So we're going to go to traceability. You can see that she has a file right in her review. So we can kind of consider this as like an inbox. This is Maya's inbox. of all the items that she should review and either approve or reject. So we can see she has the date, the user Sally edited a method. She can see the method description, and then it's pending a secondary signature. And right here, she can expand and see exactly what Sally did. So we can see Sally's edits. So if I'm comfortable with that, I'm going to approve. Say okay. Great changes. And then type in Maya's password, which will validate that Maya is approving, and that acts as Maya's electronic signature on that file. Now that file has been approved, I'm going to log in as a different user. We'll do Sam. And Sam is going to now run a test with that method. So great, Sam ran one test and he'll run a second test. So something I wanted to point out in the results table, I added the user Sam in here. So this is independent of the traceability module. This is something that was added back in Bluehill 3 days. For those of you who might still be on Bluehill 3, you can add the user in the results table if that's something that's desirable. So now I'm going to finish the sample file. So finish, it saves as well as it generates a PDF report. So I can see the PDF report. I'm going to write in a comment. And then I have to validate Sam's credentials by typing in his password. And this acts as Sam's electronic signature. So I'll submit this for review. No. So now we'll log back in as Maya. So Maya knew Sam ran some testing. So now Maya has two things in her inbox. So she cleared her inbox because she approved that method. And now she has two additional files in here. She has the PDF report as well as the sample file. You can see both files are pending her approval. So Maya can look at the results here. She can also check to see Sam's electronic signature. If Maya is happy with these results, she can approve, and that will stamp the PDF with her electronic signature. If Maya rejects, it'll stamp the PDF report with a similar box to this. It'll just say rejected, it'll show a red X, and it'll contain all of Maya's information. So I'm going to approve this and say okay. And approve the sample file. And what's really nice about seeing the electronic history too of a sample file and seeing that revision history is because as a lab manager or an admin, you can see how a user interacted with the software during a test. So if the user hits stop versus letting the test end or hit the end of test criteria, all of that will be captured in the sample file revision. So I'm going to log in one final. I'll log in as Adam. who is the admin. And in this case, I have configured reports with 3 signatures. So it requires the primary signature of the person running the test, the secondary signature, but it also requires a 3rd signature of like a final approver. So I'm going to go in here and approve. And type in Adam's password to validate his credentials. So we just navigate one final thing. I'm going to navigate over to the audit trail. So the audit trail is a system level audit trail. We looked at the method revision history a little bit. There is method revision history, sample file revision history, as well as revision history on PDF report templates. So all of that is condensed into a secure and searchable audit trail that's built into Bluehill Universal. So I've had traceability turned on for about the last month. You can see all of the interactions within the software. We've also created a really user-friendly interface for searching. So if I want to, maybe I want to see every time a file was created. I can search on create. So this is anytime a new method was created, a new report template, a new sample file, or a new PDF. I can also sort on dates. So maybe I'll do today because I know I generated a new sample file or a new PDF. However, if you remember Sally in the beginning, Sally ended up modifying an existing method, method E. So she didn't create that. So that would be a modify action. So these are only the files that were created. So I have Sam. He created this report, and I can see the fully signed report within the audit trail. There's also, we could do custom searching. So if you were undergoing an audit and an auditor said, I want to see your audit trail for the month of June, although now it's August 26th, you can easily go back and set up your audit trail and search for the month of June. We also have the ability to search on user as well as a custom text search. So let's see. You can see if you knew there was a keyword that you wanted to search on, you can find that. Which I find this particularly useful for the comments. If someone made a comment and they don't remember what type of entry it was, but they do remember their comment, you could search on some keywords from a comment. I said that was the final thing, but one really final thing that I wanted to touch on is just the electronic signatures. So electronic signatures are fully customizable per the different Bluehill file types. So if you do not need electronic signatures in your lab, you could set that up as none for all the Bluehill file types. If you do need signatures, you have the option to do primary. There's the primary signature is the person making the change, as well as a secondary or tertiary, which those should be viewed as more of a reviewer, and that person can either approve the change or reject it, all within the software. So that concludes the traceability demo. And I want to thank you all for listening and your attention, and we can open it up for questions.
All right, great. Yeah, we do have some questions. So I've got a few here that I'm going to ask you, and then I might have you look at some of the ones that we still have in the questions panel, just so we can kind of attack some of these as we go along, because we do have, looks like a few minutes, so we're good on time right now. So First one is, when using the traceability module, can I save data anywhere? How does the audit trail work?
Okay, two-part question. So you can save Bluehill data anywhere. So Bluehill data would be the sample file, the raw data, or a report generated from the software. So in the demo, we looked at a PDF report. I think that's the most common report. So those files can be saved anywhere. They can be saved local to the computer. They could be saved on a network drive, or even if you save your stuff in a cloud, you could do that. You could save your data anywhere that you like. The audit trail is separate. So the audit trail is a database. The audit trail does not save your raw data. It's just recording. It's a repository that's recording the transactions within your software.
Okay. Next question I'm seeing is, will a named transducer work for other devices like extensometers?
Yeah, it will. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. So I focused on load cells from labs that I visited within the medical device space. I usually see folks with a variety of different load cells or several different Instron equipment, and load cells get verified on all the systems, so it can be confusing for operators. So named transducers, it first comes to my mind that named transducers should be used with load cells, but you can absolutely use them with extensometers. It was mentioned in the slides earlier that named transducers work by linking a name to a serial ID. It can also be used to link a name to a device's resistor codes. So as long as your device, which I think most or all of them have to have a serial ID or a resistor code, they'll work as a named transducer.
Okay, great. Next, I'm seeing, for traceability and security, do Instron service reps need a special account? We usually have a service engineer in our lab a few times a year for calibration. We might want to use Active Directory in the future.
Okay, great question. Absolutely, you should have a specialized account for your Instron service technician. So if you're using Bluehill Security, you should, as the lab manager, own that account for the service technician. So generate a username and password for that person. If you move to Active Directory, it's completely reasonable to ask your IT department to create a special user account and call it something that will be easy for you to remember, like Instron service. And your IT department could create that user and then put that Instron service user in the correct user groups. So it'd probably be a bit of a collaboration between the lab manager and IT, but you really want to own the security accounts of all your users, even if that user is an Instron service technician. I would make sure that you're well aware of the username and password used. So then when you use traceability, you'll be able to see that the Instron service technician or the Instron service engineer logged into the software and all of their transactions.
Okay, great. Yeah, Elayne, I don't know if you have this open, but if you want to take a look real quick at the questions that are still coming in, I'm going to give you a second to kind of look through those real quick. So while Elayne kind of reads through some of those questions, I'll just kind of briefly kind of put out that reminder about that e-learning course, the Essentials of Biomedical Testing. You can get the free access code for single use. If you want access to that, all you need to do is complete the post-webinar survey that's going to pop up after our Q&A and after our wrap-up. So that's going to be coming up in just probably like 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes. So just a reminder, No, that wasn't a ton of time for you, Elayne, but hopefully you've had a chance to kind of look over a few of these other questions. Do you want to jump into some of these?
Sure, yep. So I saw a recent one. Someone asked, what version of Bluehill do you need for the new screen lock feature? So the new screen lock feature just came out in the last release, so that's version 4.21. So 4.21 was just released, and that feature is standard, so it's a standard feature in the software. So someone asked for the acceptance approval. So I'm assuming this is within the traceability module. They asked, does this work across multiple systems off of a network? So the answer is no. Right now, the Audit Trail is a SQL Server database that's local to the Instron PC, which requires approvals to occur on the Instron system. However, with that said, if you approve a method, so say a method has the primary signature as well as the secondary signature, and that method is saved on a corporate network location, that method can be used between different Instron systems. So if you really think about the electronic signature being like a certificate, once someone signs a file, a certificate is placed on that file. So if you have a method that has 2 signatures on it and that's all it requires in your laboratory to run a method, you can run that method on any system. If that made sense. So someone is asking about the electronic signature. They're asking, is the electronic signature from Instron or our company, or can we import the signature from our company to Instron? So the signature I believe the signature is considered to be your company's signature because we're using the password to validate the user. That's the user signature, and that's coming from the way you configure security. So if you're using Active Directory security, that's coming directly from your IT's corporate network, which means it's your signature on the file. So maybe, how are we doing on time? Maybe I'll answer another question.
Yeah, if you can, yeah, we are okay on time.
Okay. So someone's asking, can the author use the method immediately after a change, or does it need a secondary approval before use? And so this is dependent on how you want to configure electronic signatures. If methods don't require any electronic signatures at all, you can make a change and test right away. If they require a primary, what that means is only the person making the change requires to sign off on it. So once someone makes change and signs the method, then someone can run a test right after, or the person making the change could run a test with the method that they just modified. If you have your system configured with secondary or tertiary sign-offs, this then requires an approval before anyone can do any testing. So if, like in the demo, I modified method E under the user Sally. So if Sally went to try to run a test with that method, she wouldn't be able to because she needs her manager to approve the method. So I believe that the way we implemented electronic signatures in Bluehill Universal allows a lot of flexibility so that whatever makes the most sense for your laboratory, you can implement that. Okay, so let's see. There's another question. Maybe I'll just do this one last question, if that's okay. So this is coming from, okay, so when a method is updated on an Instron, is there a way to automatically update the same method on multiple Instrons? Or does the update need to be made manually on each Instron system? So great question. This depends on how you are saving your methods. So if your system, if your Instron system is using a computer that's not on your corporate network, that's local only, then the method that you modify, you would have to save that method on that local PC and then either recreate it on another system, or you would have to use like a thumb drive to transport that method over. However, if your system is on your corporate network, that you could save your method to a network location, and then on a different Instron system, you can open that method from that location. And then within Bluehill, maybe some of you've noticed that on the method screen, there's an MRUs list, so the most recently used. Within the software, you can actually pin methods to that screen within your MRU list. So if there's a method that you want to have all users always see, maybe it's method A or method B, you just pin method A to your MRUs list after it's been updated. Okay. So there were a few other questions, but I can answer those via email.
All right, well, I will wrap things up then. Thanks everyone for sending in your questions. It seems like we got a lot of good ones. Yeah, like Elayne said, I'll make sure to get her this list of questions and who asked it, and then we'll get those answers out to you. But before I turn you loose, I just want to close with a few quick notes. We hope you'll join us tomorrow for our final presentations. We've got 2 tomorrow, which you can see here on your screen now. If you'd like to attend but aren't registered yet, just head to instron.com now to sign up. I'm also going to drop a quick link into chat. Let me just copy that real quick and paste it down into chat. I might have pasted it twice, so we'll do that one more time. There we go. So the recording from this session will be available on our YouTube channel in just a short while, and each of you are also going to receive an email with a link to that recording. So with that said, thank you so much, Elayne, for a great presentation, and thanks to all of you for attending. We do really appreciate your time, and we hope to see you tomorrow at our 2 upcoming sessions. Take care, everyone.